Amazing story. U.S. citizen pharmacist detained by ICE for her accent. Discover how she won $13. Samantha's day had started like any other. The familiar buzz of the pharmacy's fluorescent lights and the muffled sound of customers exchanging pleasantries filled her workspace in Oak Park. Her patients respected her knowledge. She often stayed late, guiding them through complex prescriptions with her delicate Filipino accent, a source of pride that underscored her identity. But that afternoon, as she diligently organized medication shelves, a loud bang shattered her routine. ICE agents stormed through the doors. She caught their attention immediately, her accent ringing alarm bells. The words, "undocumented," slipped from one agent's mouth, poisoning the air around her. Confusion wrapped around her heart. Anger bubbled beneath the surface. How could they see her through such a distorted lens? Years of hard work in this very community evaporated in an instant like morning mist. Her mind raced. Everything she had achieved, every late-night study session powered by dreams of climbing the socio-economic ladder, felt suddenly weightless. The people she served, who would come to her for advice and comfort, would now see her as an outsider. Did they view her as a fraud? Would her patients turn away, consumed by the same anxieties that led the agents to her? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach, and seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. As she was escorted to a dim holding cell, a visceral sense of vulnerability wrapped around her body, squeezing tight. Memories of her family's sacrifices flooded her mind. Their sacrifices for a dream that felt so far out of grasp now. They had come to America seeking a better life, and she had vowed to honor their journey. But standing there, stripped of her dignity, that promise faltered. The isolation overwhelmed her. She could almost hear her parents whispering words of encouragement, yet they fell silent against the cold reality of her situation. She felt raw, exposed, stripped of the pride she usually wore like protective armor. If only they knew the truth. How her accent represented her heritage and hard work, not weakness. The realization hit her. It was not just about her. It was about an entire system built on fear and misunderstanding. In the depths of her anguish, she thought of reaching out. But who could help? The realization that her plight was not isolated gradually illuminated her darkening view. She found herself scribbling down the number of a civil rights lawyer named Isabel, a name she had received from an acquaintance during one of her nightly shifts. A flicker of hope ignited. Perhaps there was still a way to reclaim her narrative from the tight grip of oppression. As the moments dragged on, doubt crept in. Would her voice be heard, or would she be consumed by the roiling chaos of silence that threatened to engulf her? With an unfamiliar determination, she steeled herself. It was time to fight back, not only for herself, but for every whispered injustice haunting lives like hers. Just outside the cell, dim sounds of community gathered, resonant of people mobilizing to confront injustice, and Samantha, poised at the precipice of despair, could either silence her truth or step into the unknown, ready to reclaim her story. Samantha's thoughts wrestled in her mind like waves crashing against a cliff. The sterile walls of the holding cell felt suffocating, but it was the weight of uncertainty that pressed hardest against her chest. With every tick of the clock, she envisioned her life outside these confines, a life filled with interaction, empathy, and respect. Slipping further away, determination rippled through her as she recalled the essence of her pharmacy, the smiles of patients, the profound connections formed over shared stories. Each face was a testament to her hard work, yet here she stood, defined solely by her accent, a sound that bore the history of her ancestors, not a flag raised in surrender. It was time for action. A quiet resolution took root. She would not go down without a fight. In the dim light, she began to strategize. She would reach out to Isabel, the lawyer she had hastily written down. Who knew what kind of fight lay ahead? The thought of battling the system both frightened and excited her. Was she ready to elevate her struggle from silent endurance to vocal resistance? The very essence of her identity hung in the balance as she weighed her next steps. The echo of footsteps interrupted her reverie. A guard appeared with a disinterested expression, and disappointment gripped her. Where was the compassion for a fellow human? "You'll see the lawyer soon," he said, barely looking her way. The words like a thin veil over her reality, promises of the outside world that felt distant and hollow. Time melted away, filled with moment after moment of trepidation. When the door finally swung open again, an air of authority followed Isabel into the cell. Her presence was a fresh gust of wind in an otherwise stagnant atmosphere. Samantha found strength in this woman who had dedicated her life to fighting battles for those marginalized, standing resolute against systems intent on dehumanizing. "Tell me everything," Isabel instructed, her voice firm yet reassuring. Samantha poured her heart out, detailing the moments leading to her detainment, emphasizing the dignity woven into her identity. With every word, clarity emerged. She was not just a victim, she was a catalyst for change. Isabel listened, her expressions of concern mingling with determination. "You're a U.S. citizen," she reiterated, emphasizing the power of that reality. "We will leverage your story, challenge the system. They can't erase your life's work or your connection to your community with a few misguided assessments." A spark of courage ignited within Samantha. The idea of reclaiming her narrative began to take a new shape, one that intertwined her personal struggle with the broader fight against systemic injustice. This was no longer just about her accent, it was an opportunity to ignite dialogues that had long been dormant. As they finalized details for Samantha's release and a potential media strategy, a thought niggled at the edges of her mind. Could she transform this plight into more than a personal fight? While she might be the face of this struggle, was it possible to become a voice for others who had been silenced? Taking a deep breath, she resolved to uncover her voice and let it flow out into the world. And in that moment of decision, she understood. This was more than an ordeal. It was a calling. The cliff she stood on felt perilous, but underneath, she sensed the strength of a hidden current. The journey had only just begun. As Isabel prepared to leave, Samantha felt a surge of urgency. "What's next?" she asked, every fiber of her being craving clarity. Isabel met her gaze, her eyes reflecting the weight of 1,000 stories untold. "The time had come to face your truth," she replied with steady resolve. With this new challenge ahead, Samantha knew the path forward wouldn't just define her. It had the power to resonate with others who were quietly enduring unseen struggles. She was not just a pharmacist. She was ready to become an advocate, a force of resilience against injustice. The faint sound of voices outside her cell echoed in her ears like a siren's call to action. Instead of folding under oppression, she would rise. The next challenge glittered on her horizon, waiting for her. Would she be ready to confront her fears and step into her newfound role? The hours dragged, reality blurring and warping as Samantha waited for her release. Each moment amplified the silence around her, urging her to grasp the weight of what lay ahead. The flickering fluorescent lights cast shadows that danced upon the walls, shadows that mimicked her swirling thoughts. She wasn't merely counting the minutes, she was preparing herself for a world that felt both familiar and estranged, a world where she would reclaim her voice. When she finally stepped outside, the sunlight wrapped around her like an embrace. Any discomfort from the past hours faded as she blinked against the brightness, each ray igniting a flicker of hope within her. Isabel stood nearby, phone in hand, ready to execute their media strategy. "Remember, Samantha," Isabel began, her voice cutting through the haze. "This is not just about making noise. It's about crafting your narrative, one that shatters stereotypes and builds bridges." Samantha nodded, her resolve deepening. She felt an urgency building inside her, a need to be heard, to mold her experience into a narrative that could inspire others. But beneath that excitement was a creeping anxiety. What if she stumbled over her words? Or worse, what if she faltered under the pressure of her newfound responsibility? Clenching her fists, she steered her focus toward clarity. Isabel was right. The act of sharing her story could be transformative. It was time for her to step into the light, to confront the misconceptions that clouded her identity. The thoughts that had once seemed paralyzing began trickling into a form of strategy. As Isabel reviewed potential points for their media briefing, Samantha pulled a notebook from her bag. A ritualistic comfort. She began to jot down snippets of her journey. The day she opened her pharmacy, the pregnant woman who had whispered gratitude when receiving her advice, the delicate moments woven into the essence of her work that extended beyond mere transactions. Each memory recounted felt like assembling the pieces of a mosaic, a chance to present her life as a rich tapestry rather than a single thread. The afternoon turned into evening as they finalized their plan, excitement crackling in the air. Yet, lurking in the back of her mind was the image of her clients, each an individual with their own stories simmering beneath the surface. She needed to do this not just for herself, but for those who had been silenced alongside her. Revealing her truth felt like lifting a veil, revealing the shared experiences that clung to so many. "Let's refine your statements," Isabel suggested, breaking her concentration. "Your words will wield incredible power. Will you be ready?" Samantha inhaled deeply, her heart racing. Would she be able to articulate the confluence of fear and courage? The balance between vulnerability and empowerment would rest on her shoulders. Still, she remembered the warmth of the community that had rallied around her before. Those relationships were built on trust. They might just help her through this. "Let's do it," she replied, conviction lacing her voice. "We'll frame this narrative not as an accusation but as a dialogue, an invitation to reflect." Isabel smiled, affirming her choice. But as Samantha prepared to step into the interviews, a gnawing thought struck her. What if, amid the chaos, she lost sight of her primary aim? In trying to galvanize public support, could her own authenticity become diluted? The idea clung to her, threatening to unravel her focus. She had to remember, no matter how overwhelming the moment became, this was her voice and her narrative. It was vital to find that balance, to speak her truth without letting the noise of the audience drown out her message. As they approached the bustling studio, Samantha felt the world shift again. She was no longer just a pharmacist under siege. She was a woman armed with the resilience of her experiences. Approaching the mic, she rehearsed her opening line in her head, determination swelling within her. This was her moment to confront not only her fears, but also the very roots of misunderstanding that led her here. But as she breathed in the charged air, she caught a glimpse of the very system they aimed to confront. An accusatory glare from behind the cameras, a reminder that her voice also stirred resistance. The weight of that scrutiny crashed over her like the tides, forcing her to question if she was truly ready for this battle. As she took her place before the camera, fully aware of the eyes upon her, doubt flickered at the edge of her mind, threatening to pull her under. Could she transform her ordeal into a bridge rather than a burning divide? The answer sat just beyond her reach, waiting to unfold as the lights illuminated her face. Would she dare to rise above the noise and reclaim her narrative, or would she falter beneath the weight of expectation? The moment of truth was at hand, and Samantha steeled herself for whatever came next. The studio glowed with a harsh light that seemed to intensify every second. Samantha felt a flutter in her stomach, a blend of nerves and anticipation. The mic was crisp, and the audience, however invisible, felt like a palpable force in the room. She stood, poised yet shaky, waiting for the signal to begin. As her heart raced, memories of her pharmacy flooded her mind. Her clients, their concerns, the small victories that never felt like enough, and the relentless grind of operating in a system that often felt indifferent. She remembered their conversations filled with hope and trepidation, each one a reflection of not only her role as a pharmacist, but also her newfound role as a spokesperson for resilience. But this wasn't just about pharmacy. It was about challenging a broader narrative. With a deep inhalation, she pushed out the thoughts that encroached on her confidence. Focusing on the bright lights above, she visualized each beam as an opportunity to illuminate her story, and the stories of those who felt unheard. Welcome, Samantha. The host began with a congenial tone, but she sensed the unspoken weight behind the smile. His eyes held an intensity that suggested scrutiny, not empathy. Samantha swallowed hard, feeling the pressure mount. "Can you tell us what led you to become an advocate after your recent detainment?" he prodded, the undertow of skepticism threading through his inquiry. She squared her shoulders, her next words crystallizing in clarity. "The moment I was silenced by that detainment was not merely an attack on my identity as a pharmacist, but a broader reflection of how systemic failures can harm individuals like myself. I realized that to remain silent would be to betray those who lack a voice." As she spoke, she felt an unexpected rush of confidence. Each sentence she articulated resonated with her growing sense of purpose. The words flowed from her as she narrated the indifference she faced, the stranglehold of bureaucracy that complicated the lives of countless individuals. Yet beneath her bravado, the anxiety continued to writhe within her. Moments earlier she hadn't been worried about telling her story. Now she was conscious of the wave of invisible judgment incoming from the audience. What if they twisted her words, painted her as a liability rather than a beacon of hope? What if the very people who needed to hear her message turned away, unwilling to confront discomfort? She pivoted gracefully in her thoughts. She would not allow fear to charter her narrative. Instead, she would embrace vulnerability as strength. "People often do not realize the impact of their words or decisions," she continued, her voice unwavering. "Every day we have the choice to build bridges or barricades. I choose to build bridges." With each statement, the lingering doubt lessened, momentarily overshadowed by a firm commitment to truth. The host leaned forward, intrigued. "But how do you plan to enact change, especially facing such formidable obstacles?" Taking a breath that felt charged with possibility, she replied, "I believe change begins by sharing our stories, by acknowledging that we are more than labels, more than stereotypes. We are human beings. Each experience I have felt is trailed by many others, echoing the same struggle for recognition." As the conversation unfolded, Samantha drew on her hidden strength, her capacity to empathize with others while remaining resolute in her own journey. Each moment she spent on that mic not only furthered her narrative, but also armed her with the conviction to press on despite the judgment surrounding her. Yet as the dialogue continued, a shadow flickered in her thoughts. What if her story wasn't enough? What if the very framework of the media twisted her intentions? When the segment drew to a close, she felt both proud and apprehensive. Had she adequately addressed the systemic issues that permeated her life and the lives of others like her? Facing this reflected scrutiny, she realized this fight was just beginning. As the host concluded and the camera shifted away, a new wave of uncertainty surged through her. It wasn't merely about her personal narrative anymore. It was about navigating the mess of perceptions, including her own. Samantha stepped off the stage, feeling the weight of expectation settle back on her shoulders. Would her words have the power to provoke a deeper understanding, or would they get lost in translation? Exiting the studio, she glanced back, grappling with the undercurrents of her experience. If this was just the first step, what awaited her next? Would she be ready for the aftermath, the backlash, the inevitable conversations that would probe deeper into her resolve? An unforeseen challenge loomed as she realized the harsh reality. Genuine change often comes at a steep price. Tomorrow she would need to confront the real test, face the people who held the power to either fortify her narrative or dismantle it completely. What awaited her there? Samantha's head spun as she descended the steps of the studio, her resolve mingling with trepidation. The air outside felt sharp against her skin, a cold reminder of the failure that lingered just below the surface, the shattering fear that her story would not spark change. She drew in a few deep breaths, seeking clarity while staring at the bright city lights in the distance. Each flicker reminded her that the world was vast, complex, and often indifferent. The next day promised to be more than just another media engagement. It was set to be a pivotal moment, a collision course with individuals who held not just power, but also the capacity to alter her trajectory. What would she say when confronted with opposing perspectives? Those who doubted her experiences, or worse, those whose policies had perpetuated her struggle. She drank her morning coffee slowly, calculating her words as the aroma filled her apartment. Each sip grounded her, granting a moment's peace. Yet restlessness brewed beneath her skin, demanding action. She was not one to walk in the shadows of uncertainty. In the silence of her kitchen, her mind traveled to the stories her clients had shared, each one fortified by their unique struggles. They had trust in her, and she had to carry that trust forward, unfurling it into a narrative that might galvanize others. At her desk, she pulled out her laptop and opened a blank document. She needed a strategy, a roadmap for the confrontation looming ahead. What if she didn't just play the role of an advocate, but instead an educator? If she could humanize her words, translate her pain into lessons, perhaps she could engender understanding even among the most reluctant listeners. She began typing, weaving an outline for her speech, a balance of facts and emotional resonance, personal anecdotes mixed with statistics that revealed the crushing weight of systemic indifference. Each word felt like armor, preparing her for the verbal battles she might face. As she delved deeper into the facts, the enormity of the task stirred something fierce inside her. She was more than a pharmacist. She was a translator of humanity, tasked with bridging the gap between experience and understanding. But her fingers hesitated above the keyboard. What if her articulation fell short? If the numbers didn't resonate, or worse, if the audience remained unconvinced? At the heart of this endeavor lay the question of authenticity. Could she bear to expose her scars if doing so meant being further marginalized? Samantha paused to consider the consequences. She knew well the importance of vulnerability. It had been her guiding principle in the pharmacy. People trusted her when she showed empathy, when she grounded her advice in shared humanity. Would that hold true in a broader context? With a sudden clarity, she decided, she wouldn't shy away from the messiness of her truth. She would reveal her frailty because within that frailty lay courage. Her hair stood on end as she willed herself to embrace this premise. Raw honesty as a potent catalyst for connection. As the sun set, the shadows in her apartment grew longer, obscuring her doubts but illuminating her resolve. The night before she faced her critics, she turned off her laptop and leaned back in her chair, resting with a renewed sense of purpose. This was about finding her voice, transforming it into a beacon for those who felt invisible. That night, sleep crept upon her, but not before she meticulously rehearsed her speech, as though each iteration solidified her commitment to herself and her community. The next day, as she stood at the threshold of the venue, her heart raced anew, but this time it pulsed with a reinforcement of purpose, a recognition that she was more than equipped to confront whatever awaited her inside. Stepping into the room filled with familiar faces, some hopeful, some doubtful, Samantha tightened her grip around the folder in her hand, her path ahead clear. The time had come to face those who could either amplify her story or distort it entirely. How would she navigate the conversations that would challenge her beliefs and test her resilience? With every step, both excitement and dread intertwined, heightened by the knowledge that her true test had just begun. Samantha stepped into the venue, the murmur of voices creating a backdrop of uncertainty that both excited and terrified her. With every stride, she felt the weight of her folder, her carefully crafted speech, the culmination of a sleepless night, press against her chest as if it were a shield. The room was divided, a sea of faces reflecting a spectrum of engagement. Some held skepticism in their eyes, remnants of ignorance that often clouded understanding. Others leaned forward, eager for the revelations she was about to share. Yet it struck her that her power lay not just in the story she would recount, but in her ability to listen, to engage in a dialogue where empathy could reign. "Good morning, everyone," she began, her voice steadying as she scanned the audience. It was as if the air shifted, drawing attention towards her, granting her the stage she had envisioned. She paused, allowing the gravity of her words to sink in, before unveiling the opening lines of her narrative. Each syllable carried not just her message, but the voices of those who had entrusted her with their stories. She started with her own journey, a pharmacist caught in a web of systemic injustice that often left the most vulnerable without a voice. She spoke of long nights, insurmountable mountains of paperwork, and the heart-wrenching stories her clients presented to her. With each anecdote, she aimed to construct a bridge, inviting her listeners to traverse the unexplored landscape of their assumptions. Yet she could feel the tension within the room. As she shifted to the factual evidence of healthcare disparities, she noticed a shift in body language. Some arms crossed defensively, and a few faces turned skeptical. It was the doubters, the ones who thrived on statistics that excluded the human element. Would she be able to convey the heart of her message amidst this palpable barrier? With a quick breath, Samantha leaned into her discomfort, doubling down on her authenticity. I stand here today not as a statistic, but as a testament to the resilience of those silenced by bureaucracy. Each number you see on a spreadsheet represents a life, a story waiting to be acknowledged. The silence became thick and charged. Was she breaking through their walls, or merely pushing against them fruitlessly? She pressed on, determined to rise above the echoes of doubt. Her narrative was not just hers, it was an assembly of all the struggles that had shaped her. She could hear the rhythm of her heart, a metronome guiding her resolve, each pulse urging her to transcend the ordinary. The confrontation came when a voice called out from the back, cutting through her momentum. But how do we change the system? A challenge, or perhaps a lifebuoy to pull her thoughts together. Instead of retreating into herself, Samantha focused, her gaze unwavering. Change begins with each of us recognizing our own complicity in silence. To speak truth means to acknowledge the discomfort, she urged. The audience shifted, the change palpable, curiosity blending with skepticism, pushing their limits of understanding. As she articulated her vision for transformation, painting possibilities rooted in community engagement and legislative advocacy, a flicker of enthusiasm ignited. Her words were a spark. The room began to resonate with a burgeoning movement of realization. She kindled the hope of collaboration, of taking collective steps towards justice. Yet amidst the surge of inspiration, doubt seeped in, a familiar foe whispering reminders of risk and pushback. The time was fleeting, and she could feel the session draw to a close. Would she walk away from this moment feeling victorious or vulnerable? The truth of her impact remained unknown, and the weight of that uncertainty gnawed at her. In those final moments, her heart raced as she initiated a call to action, knowing full well it was now or never. Recognize that our voices matter. Stand with those who are too often ignored. Together we can reshape what is possible. As she concluded, applause erupted, but it felt distant, almost surreal. The resonance of her own words reverberated within her mind. Had she truly met the moment, or had she merely inspired temporary enthusiasm? Stepping off the stage, the tension in her muscles did not subside. It morphed into a persistent questioning of what she had set in motion. Would there be real change, or were these merely empty words echoing against a wall? And as she navigated through the crowd, seeking familiar faces, Samantha realized the journey was far from over. There were deeper conversations to enjoy, complex challenges awaiting address. Someone at the back caught her attention, their expression not just impressed but serious. A potential ally or an uncompromising skeptic? Curiosity surged within her. Who were they, and what story remained unspoken between them? Samantha's heart raced as she approached the figure lingering at the edge of the crowd. The intensity in their gaze sent an electric thrill through her, mingled with anxiety. Who were they? A supporter? A detractor? The weight of their unspoken narrative hung in the air, taunting her curiosity. "Excuse me, do you have a moment?" The voice was low, steady, the kind that commanded attention. She met the eyes of a woman in a crisp blazer, her features sharp and analytical, showcasing a fierce intelligence that sparked something in Samantha. "Of course," Samantha replied, her voice steadier than she felt. They moved away from the throng, the noise fading into a background hum, allowing space for genuine dialogue. "I'm Dr. Collins," the woman introduced herself, extending a hand. "I wasn't quite sure what to expect when I came here, but your speech, it was something unlike what I've heard before." Samantha felt a flicker of validation, yet a knot of apprehension tightened in her stomach. "Thank you, but it's really a reflection of my experiences and those of my clients. I just want to convey their stories. Dr. Collins nodded, her gaze piercing Samantha's facade. And that's precisely why I wanted to talk to you. The healthcare system is a labyrinth of challenges, mostly born from a flawed understanding. You articulated emotions that statistics can't capture. Samantha leaned in, encouraged yet wary. But doubt remains. How do we shift this paradigm? It feels insurmountable at times. Dr. Collins's expression softened, revealing empathy. Understanding is just the beginning. Change requires strategic diligence. Have you considered aligning with political advocates? They value narratives like yours and can amplify them. Her words struck a chord. Samantha had spent countless hours immersed in the voices of others, yet she had never envisioned leveraging their stories within the political landscape. I've been so focused on the human aspect. I guess I never thought about how policy could play a role. Realization settled like a weight. Was her dedication to personal stories limiting a broader impact? Perhaps genuine transformation required more than just introspection. It needed external force. It's essential to balance the personal with the political, Dr. Collins advised, her tone steady and persuasive. Your passion is your greatest strength. Don't shy away from guiding that spirit into advocacy. There's a void waiting for voices like yours in those discussions. You could be pivotal. Samantha felt a swell of emotion. Was she ready to step into this realm? The idea scared her. Writing persuasive letters, meeting powerful individuals, standing alongside activists. She had always considered herself a voice for the ignored, not a warrior in the political arena. You're right, she heard herself assert. I can't just hold the stories close. They deserve to be heard beyond these walls. Exactly, Dr. Collins replied, her smile wide, encouraging. But it won't be easy. Expect pushback, even from allies. Your perspectives may challenge people's comfortable beliefs. A shiver ran down Samantha's spine. The thoughts of confronting biases and ignorance felt daunting yet exhilarating. I'm tired of staying confined, she asserted, a newfound determination igniting her spirit. Suddenly, a flicker of anxiety clouded her resolve again. But what if I fail? What if my voice isn't strong enough? Dr. Collins leaned closer, an intensity sparking in her eyes. Failure is part of growth, Samantha. It's about the journey, not just the outcome. Embrace the mistakes, they'll shape your evolution. With that, the fog of doubt began to lift. Samantha could visualize new pathways emerging before her, her story weaving tightly into a tapestry of advocacy. Could she really harness her experience and transform it into action? Thank you for this conversation, Samantha murmured, the weight of unspoken possibilities swirling within her. As she took a step back, she felt a sense of liberation seep into her core. What would happen if she fully embraced the challenge of advocacy? What if she dared to integrate her voice with action? And just as she was about to dismiss her fears, a thought struck sharply. Was she truly prepared for a confrontation that lay ahead, testing her resolve and commitment? The moment of truth beckoned, and she could no longer remain on the sidelines, waiting for change to arrive. As she turned to leave Dr. Collins, a new sense of purpose ignited within her. The journey was growing complex, but she was ready to confront whatever came next. Samantha stood at the edge of the bustling street, the sunlight illuminating her thoughts with a fierce clarity. She had just signed up for a workshop that promised insights into political advocacy, a leap that felt equal parts daunting and liberating. The flutter in her stomach mirrored the clash of anticipation and fear. Could she truly transform her in-depth understanding of human stories into a potent political weapon? The thought lingered, morphing into a resolve that propelled her forward. In the days following her encounter with Dr. Collins, each moment felt tinged with urgency. She began seeking out workshops, online courses, and even community meetings that focused on advocacy strategies. The fundamentals of lobbying, persuasive writing, and the art of storytelling within political contexts infused her routine with purpose. She feverishly took notes, her mind racing to keep pace with the burgeoning possibilities. Yet, with each new lesson, another layer of self-doubt began to peel away. How could she negotiate with lawmakers when her background had been firmly rooted in the personal narratives of healthcare struggles? Would they see her as just another voice, muffled among the cacophony of seasoned professionals. The very essence of her identity. It had been a source of pride, but now it felt like an anchor dragging her down. She confronted these questions during her first workshop on persuasive letter writing. The instructor, an ardent activist with decades of experience, urged the attendees to harness their unique perspectives. Each of you carries a story that deserves to be framed as a powerful argument. Use it, he asserted, scanning the room with an intensity that demanded attention. Samantha wrestled internally. Had she been undervaluing her tenacity? The instructor's words ignited something deep within her. Perhaps she was not merely an observer of stories, but an engendering force for expression, capable of drafting compelling narratives that could sway decisions. That evening, she returned home with a mixture of enthusiasm and uncertainty. There was an impending sense of a new reality waiting to be unlocked, yet she grappled with the fear of inadequacy. As she settled into her usual writing spot, she laid out her ideas on paper. The healthcare system is broken, but we can fix it. She penned a letter to her representative, integrating stories that had haunted her clients, those filled with raw emotion and helplessness. She felt each word resonate as she constructed her thoughts, pushing through the fortress of fear that had kept her quiet. Days turned into weeks, and with each letter she wrote, she found herself embracing a duality. Human advocate by day, aspiring political activist by night. At times, doubts still circled like vultures. What qualifications did she have to represent these voices in a political discourse that often felt rigged against them? But then she'd recall Dr. Collins's resolute words about failure being a facet of growth. Each step into the political landscape revealed itself as a battleground where voices clashed, not a pristine theater where polished speeches reigned. She could feel her pulse quicken, excitement melding with anxiety in a rhythm she was becoming accustomed to. The defining moment arrived suddenly when she received an invitation to speak at a local forum on healthcare reform. A surge of adrenaline coursed through her. This was the step she had envisioned, a platform from which she could amplify the voices she fought for. Yet the weight of the act loomed heavy. What if her fears eclipsed her message? As she prepared her speech, she meticulously selected her stories, aiming to connect the emotional fabric of her clients' experiences with the cold statistics of healthcare failures. Each draft intensified her commitment, but also surfaced deeper fears. What if she faltered in front of an audience? What if she wasn't enough? Finally, she looked in the mirror, taking a deep breath. "You can do this," she whispered, summoning everything she had learned. The moment of truth was nigh. And as she felt the gravity of her responsibility, she knew she was about to confront not just her audience but herself. The forum date approached like a shadow closing in, each tick of the clock amplifying her uncertainty. Would she rise to the challenge, or would fear reclaim its place as her unyielding companion? Samantha's hands trembled as she stood backstage, the soft murmur of the audience filtering through the heavy curtain. Her heart raced. Minutes ago, she had paced the small green room, rehearsing her words until they lost their meaning, the once vibrant phrases now dull under the weight of expectation. The faces of her clients loomed in her mind, their struggles giving her purpose but also filling her with despair. She fought to suppress the rising tide of anxiety. This was her moment, not just to share her passion for healthcare reform, but to transform it into a collective call for action. Yet self-doubt slithered through her thoughts. Was she qualified? Could her intimate understanding of these narratives translate into impactful advocacy? Just before crossing onto the stage, the instructor's voice echoed in her mind. Each story had the potential to form a powerful argument. As she stepped into the light, she felt the warmth wash over her. Instinctively, she sought out familiar faces from her community who had shown solidarity during her journey. Their nods urged her to continue. She absorbed their encouragement like fuel, and despite the uncertainty lurking beneath her confidence, she began speaking. "The healthcare system is broken," she declared, the urgency dripping from her words. As she shared the stories of her clients, an elderly woman unable to afford her medication, a young father paralyzed by debt from medical bills, she felt the audience's pulse synchronize with her own emotions. She sought to weave their individual tales into a compelling narrative that encapsulated not just their struggles, but the broader failure of a system that prioritized profits over people. With each passing minute, the fear began to morph into resolve. She articulated statistical injustices alongside personal stories, framing the crisis with the raw human experience at its core. The connection she forged with the audience transformed her fear into empowerment, each heart she touched allowing her voice to grow stronger. But just as she felt herself gaining momentum, a question from the audience came like a crashing wave against her newfound confidence. A member challenged her with skepticism, positioning her as an outsider in a political landscape dominated by veterans of advocacy. "What qualifies you to speak on behalf of those who suffer?" challenged. Samantha held her breath. The vulnerability of that moment tested her determination, yet a flicker of defiance ignited within her. Instead of shrinking, she stood taller, her voice unwavering. "I am not here solely as a representative. I am here as a conduit for those whose stories echo through time, unheard and unseen. I do not claim expertise as a politician, but I do claim the wisdom of lived experience." The applause that followed felt like an outpouring of relief. She had faced a shadow of doubt and emerged momentarily victorious. But this would not conclude her internal battle. The question lingered in her mind, compelling her to reflect. Did sharing other people's stories somehow diminish her own? As she stepped off the stage, adrenaline coursed through her veins, mingled with the anxiety of her earlier fears. Had she truly succeeded? Or merely muddled through, inadvertently exposing her own inexperience? This confrontation was not merely with the audience, but with herself, her identity in flux. In the days that followed, Samantha sought to consolidate her learning, viewing this experience as a milestone in her professional journey, rather than a conclusion. Each conversation she engaged in, every piece of feedback she received, only illuminated the road ahead, full of paths she hadn't yet explored. As she delved into further advocacy workshops, she began to realize that her worth was not defined solely by qualifications, but by her passion and the weight of the stories she carried. The political landscape was not her enemy. It was a complex web to navigate, one where she needed to hone her skills and assert her voice. But with every new realization, a sense of urgency accompanied her. In the arena of political discourse, weaknesses lurked just beneath the surface, often manifesting as imposter syndrome. Each day she faced the looming specter of inadequacy, now amplified by her first speaking engagement. What she hadn't anticipated was a phone call that would shift her trajectory once again. A well-known advocacy group was looking for fresh voices. They wanted someone who spoke from personal experience, someone real. Was she ready to take the leap again, to push further into the unknown that lay outside of her comfort zone? Samantha felt the anticipation surge within her as she surveyed the conference room, filled with individuals eager to hear new perspectives on healthcare reform. The past months had transformed her, from a pharmacist caught in a web of systemic injustice to an advocate wielding her story with conviction. Now, as she prepared to speak on behalf of the very organization that had reached out to her, she found herself on a precipice teetering between fear and exhilaration. Each step she took toward the podium felt electric, charged with the collective hope of those whose voices she channeled. The sea of faces reflected a spectrum from curiosity to skepticism, yet she could sense a willingness to engage. Time had molded her. She was no longer that timid woman haunted by doubts. She had achieved clarity, a steadfast recognition of the importance of every story she carried. "Thank you for having me here," she greeted the audience, her voice emanating with newfound strength. "Today I come before you not just as a pharmacist, but as a representative of those who navigate our complicated healthcare system on a daily basis." She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in, her confidence building with each heartbeat. The journey had not been simple. There had been sleepless nights poring over policy papers, discussions with seasoned advocates, and workshops that challenged her to frame her experiences within the broader narrative of equity. The intricate web of systemic failures was now a tapestry she understood deeply. She began weaving her narrative: an elderly man straining to afford his medications, a child receiving inadequate treatment due to insurance loopholes. Each story became a thread binding her message together. As she reached the climactic moment of her speech, her pulse quickened. We stand on the brink of change, she declared passionately. But change requires action. We cannot simply acknowledge the inequities, we must challenge them vocally and relentlessly. The lives we touch depend on it. With encouragement burbling from the crowd, she forged ahead. Yet I know firsthand the struggle to be heard. I was once defined by my accent, a source of pride that was twisted into a weakness. I am here to tell you the world needs to hear our voices, those of us whose stories have been relegated to the background. Applause erupted, resonating through her like an affirmation. The empowerment cascading through her was palpable. She reveled in the moment, but realized this victory was not merely personal, it was indicative of the broad acceptance of stories like hers that deserve to be shared. After her session, the engagement didn't end. She was approached by others, people connecting with her on a deeper level, sharing their struggles and triumphs, relating to her journey. Each conversation solidified her place in this movement. She was no longer merely a participant. She was becoming a leader, a beacon of strength for the marginalized. An unforeseen opportunity arose when a prominent media outlet asked to feature her story, her rise from detainment to advocacy, the true depth of her transformation. The request stirred excitement within her. She had the chance to reach even more people, to inspire wider dialogues. When the article was published, the reactions flooded in, affirming her place in the discussion. People were writing in, sharing their own experiences, and some expressing gratitude for finally being represented in a way that resonated with their own lives. Samantha felt an overwhelming sensation wash over her, a blend of pride and responsibility. She understood now. Her voice mattered. Weeks passed, and as she delivered speeches and engaged with community forums, her foundation grew stronger. Accomplishing this ascent demanded vulnerability, embracing her identity while also galvanizing a shared narrative that transcended her individual story. The day came when Samantha received an award for her contributions to advocacy within the healthcare sector. Local officials applauding her tenacity and the darkness she turned into light. Standing before the crowd, she grasped the trophy with steady hands, feeling the weight of fulfillment. This was never just about me, she began, reflecting on her transformation. The journey from fear to action. It is about all of us who have been dismissed. Let's continue to share, to challenge, and to advocate, ensuring our voices resonate for those still silent. The warmth of applause wrapped around her like a cocoon as she stepped down. No longer doubting her worth, she embraced the strength of her newfound identity. Samantha had conquered her fears, emerged as a force for change, and solidified her role not just as a pharmacist, but as an indomitable advocate. With her heart invigorated and her purpose illuminated, she resolved to push further into this vital work. The external validation, the recognition and respect, was uplifting, yet she understood the most important victory was her own inner transformation. In addressing the world outside, she had finally reconciled with the woman within, but this was only the beginning. She felt excitement coursing through her. She was on the path her family had always dreamed of, honoring their sacrifices, honoring her identity with fierce conviction. Now was the time to bear witness to the strength of stories, her own and those of countless others. Subscribe immediately to the channel. To not miss the next exclusive emotional stories, leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. This is the moment to show your support. Don't wait, even one more second to share.